It took voters a matter of hours to change governments. A sweep of the majority of the seats gave the Progressive Liberal Party a mandate to govern for the next 5 years. It also meant the Free National Movement was once again the minority. As the PLP gets down to the business of governing, the question is, what's next for the FNM? When the government now becomes the opposition, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made about the future of the party. Hello and welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. There are some stark realities to politics that every politician must always consider. To borrow a phrase, there is the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And now the FNM must face into yet another election defeat. Tonight our topic is Dissecting Defeat with the Free National Movement. We will talk to some former cabinet ministers as we attempt to dissect the outcome and look at the future of the Free National Movement. Stay tuned, our discussion begins on the other side of this break. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight, our topic is Dissecting Defeat. On September 16th, the voting public sent a resounding message to the now former Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis, and his government. It was time to go. So what happened? Who is to blame? And what's next for the party? My first guest is the former Member of Parliament for the Amacraw constituency and former Minister of Financial Services, Trade and Industry and Immigration. Elsworth Johnson, welcome to On the Record. Welcome once again.
Thank you very much, and it's a delight and pleasure to be here.
Now, help us, those of us who've never been in politics and don't know what it's like, we're only just the observers. What was it like for you on September 17th, the day after the election?
The day after, I thank God for another day to serve Him, another opportunity to conquer and subdue. And we celebrated a phenomenon that we have in the Bahamas, that's peaceful transfer of government. And when you look at what's happening around the world, even though we suffered a defeat at the polls, we collected ourselves, we're on the ground, and we're ready to go. Because we understand and appreciate that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, this country that we love, deserves and demands a loyal opposition that's efficient, competent, and ready and prepared to defend this Commonwealth.
It's interesting you said that, because I think in all of this, sometimes we miss the fact that we continue to have peaceful elections,
yes,
I think, which is a model and something to be proud of.
Yes.
But let's talk about the contributing factors to your loss. What do you think contributed to the FNM's loss?
Listen, unprecedented times, Irma, Dorian, COVID-19, and the frustration index was very high. when you look at our accomplishments in the context of COVID-19, Dorian, and Irma, we started the total digitization of the entire public service. We revamped and rejuvenated BPL in immigration where I was. By the 31st of September, every application should be digitized. We engage in new philosophy in terms of trade and industry, engaging stakeholders. The dump fires, gone. So there was a lot of things that were happening. But when you look at COVID-19 and how things are shifting, I'm following the world, what is happening. And it's unfortunate as if today is not the pandemic. It doesn't seem that serious anymore. In that, you had to have lockdowns, reopenings. It affected businesses. And this was not only endemic to the Bahamas, but around the world. And persons felt that. And so I think there are certain things that we may have gotten wrong. And so when I speak to the frustration, and people got tired.
I was about to bring that up. I hung on to frustration index.
Yes.
Because despite, these accomplishments that you have laid out, people day to day were frustrated, they were angry, they were upset, they felt lied to even in some instances. There was and still is a trust deficit. Where was the disconnect? What happened? Because if you're now laying out these accomplishments, they obviously didn't resonate with people.
And many more accomplishments. But this was not something that was only endemic to the Bahamas. And you had an opposition that was pushing it as if this was only local to the Bahamas. When you look at Europe, you look at Singapore, you look at other Caribbean countries, the United States of America, we were scientifically led. The Prime Minister always said that. I want to commend him and commend the Bahamian people for the opportunity to serve. And so this is my best illustration when I was walking. A gentleman told me, he says, listen, you did not bring Dorian nor COVID-19, but doesn't change the fact that my wife and I and my children are not working. We have no food. Yes, there's a national feeding program, and I am irritated, Mr. Johnson. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. And so, those things, we tried our best to deal with them, but in the context, we did a whole lot, BPL. The whole lights going off is a thing in the past. So we were extremely focused. But those things happen.
But let me ask you this, though. Was there enough done to promote these things? Because from where I sat, I saw a campaign that was focused primarily on a Dr. Minnis, but primarily on just COVID and what had been done in the COVID context. But, was the message lost to the people somewhere?
Listen, I don't think so, because we had ads that were going out telling persons realized that, listen, the lights weren't going off. We took the policy that nobody's water or light bills would be disconnected. That happened. But to my mind, it's like the master says, it's very little you can say to somebody, right? If they are of the view that their basic needs aren't being met. And when I say the basic needs, Maslow says there's a hierarchy of needs. Bahamians are very independent. They want to be able to provide that. And so even in the context of providing food, providing light, men wanted to be able to go and work themselves. Our number one industry, tourism, which provides about 60% of our gross domestic product, shut down overnight. No planes flying. And so persons couldn't move. And so the steps we took at that time were the steps that persons around the world, that the World Health Organization was saying that these are the things that you should do, that our medical professionals were advising us to do. And obviously today, COVID-19 is being so transitory in terms of the way that we're dealing with it, because I'm watching every day, the doctors are saying, what we do today may not necessarily be what we do tomorrow. And then on some occasions, I quite recall the Prime Minister reaching out to the leader of the opposition and saying, come man, let's sit down and deal with this. They didn't come. And so a lot of the things that they criticize us for this morning, they're finding that the reality on the ground, that the medical professionals are now advising them. And so the travel health visa. Said that they would get rid of it. Now they're saying it's very good for informational purposes, right? And so, listen, we realize that as a party, we have to do a strategic rethink.
Stick up in there. I want to come back to that. We're going to get to that in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about voter turnout. Normally, I mean, you spoke earlier about the peaceful transfer of power, which is very important. But normally in Bahamian elections, we see somewhere about 90% in terms of voter turnout. This time around, we were looking at about 65%. How did that affect the elections from your perspective?
Well, personally, I'll look at Yamacraw. We knew where we were focusing. COVID is a very serious thing. You've had COVID, I've had COVID. I'm very careful about what happens or who I interact with. And so, you know, a number of persons probably didn't come up because of COVID-19. And then, as I indicated, the frustration level, you know, there's a consideration about leadership, whether or not that affected it. And so we're still in the phase of having a comprehensive analysis of what really happened, because I don't think we've seen the reduction in voter turnout as we did, I think, ever in the history of the Bahamas.
I definitely would agree with you on that. Do you think the snap election hurt you? From where we sat, it seemed some candidates were almost caught off guard.
It didn't hurt me, because I was always ready. If you look at the program today that we were doing in Yamacraw. And so understanding the constitutional democracy that we have, the Prime Minister had the power to call it before or shortly thereafter. And when you look at elections, normally they would call it a few months before or 2 days before, so you didn't do anything wrong. But it was then to just work. And I think we laid out all of our accomplishments.
So do you think if he had waited until May, the result would have been the same?
Too early to call. Too early to call.
Yeah. Let's talk about now your former portfolio. Over 900 Haitians have been taken into custody since about last week, Wednesday. We're now obviously in another immigration crisis when it comes to this. What's the answer?
Listen, obviously our brothers in the South from the Republic of Haiti is experiencing socio-political and economic, and you add humanitarian crisis. There's only so much that we can do. And you've heard, and I know from my experience, what you saw in the United States, 30,000 Haitians turning up on the doorsteps of the United States with the notion that they will be given political asylum because someone spread that and there's monies to be made. And then at one point you had persons saying that there was a bridge built from the Bahamas. Well, now the context is that you have a new Haitian president in the Bahamas and he's flung the doors open. That's the word on the streets. We have to do as best we can to protect the dignity of the human person, but firmly say to persons, because we're stretched thin, when you look at schools, healthcare, social welfare system, that there's only so much 400,000 people can do. If we take 4,000 persons, right, you're looking at 4% of your population. And so you have to be extremely careful. So as forceful as we can be in respecting the dignity of the human person on a loving way to our brothers in the South, you have to say this is what we're able to do and demand of the region and the world that more has to be done to help a country like Haiti that's done so much.
What role would the Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Bill, you think, play in all of this?
Well, it would. I want to commend the Minister's administration for drafting it and all the work that Dame Anita has done. It would put in place, it would deal with persons who were being born in the Bahamas, and it would speed that process up. It would deal strategically with persons who are seeking asylum, because it would set up committees to deal with it. It would set up appeal boards to deal with those individuals. So it would do a lot to help those persons that are here. But there's a distinction to be made. You have thousands that are on the move, and so you need the assistance of the Americans or your partners, world partners, to assist with what's really happening in Haiti.
Why wasn't more done, though, to pass that legislation while in office?
There's a whole lot that we were doing. We reviewed it. It was to go to public consultation was done. But then you had COVID-19 that came where no public service was sent home. You had a person speaking about spending money. Nobody was sent home. We fed thousands of persons. And there were any number of things that we were attending to. Passing legislation for public procurement, first fiscal responsibility. We also passed legislation for unexplained wealth. So it was a lot of things that we were doing in the context of COVID-19 while realizing that we could not move. So you had to move then to totally digitize everything. So you get passports, work permits, you can now make applications online to immigration and all those different things. So there are a whole lot of things that we were focusing on to have done to cause this country. Financial services didn't take a dip. As a matter of fact, the person's coming to the Bahamas because of our locality and our value proposition. It went up. And so there were so many things that we were dealing with. But most certainly it was most significant in our agenda.
We are just about out of time, so we're going to talk about the future very quickly. Are you going to support Dr. Hubert Minnis to stay on as leader? And would you be offering yourself for office if given the opportunity again?
Listen, those are internal matters for the party, right? Obviously, if you're in a NASCAR race and you win, there's a strategic analysis you have to do of your driver and of your vehicle to make sure it goes better. Well, if you blow an engine, there's a strategic analysis you have to do. And so whatever we do will have to be done internally. Normally, in this context and in the government structure we have, if you have such a catastrophic failure or loss, there's something that is expected. But we will deal with that in a way that persons preserve their dignity.
And it's a good political answer.
Yes.
But would you be offering yourself if given the opportunity?
I'm in it. I haven't gone anywhere. My headquarters are open. Not for leadership at this stage. I have to deal, if I decide, obviously I have to speak to my family. But I told my leader, and my colleagues know it, that if I have to carry the water, stand at the door, I'm here, and I'm here to fight. I'm just, and even more so with what I see that's happening in the early days of this administration. You know, contracts being suspended, persons being coerced. It reminds me of the dark day that we said that we would not want to occur in the Bahamas anymore when you look at the life of Mr. Edmund Moxie, where children were sent. You have persons calling me now with their scholarships. Promotions that were confirmed by independent commissions, which the courts have already said are supposed to be insulated from political influence. They're now being reviewed, and it is being trumpeted by someone who should be the epitome of objectivity and impartiality, that is the Minister of Public Service, who has a dual function of party chairman, and I don't know how you could build a Chinese wall to separate it, and the Minister of Public Service. And when you want to see what a public servant should be, it should not be someone who's saying if you supported the Free National Movement, this is what's going to happen to you. Now, we understand that when there's a transition, you would bring in your policy team.
Sure.
That's all well and good. But for the level of fear that is being immediately cast over the Bahamas and concerns that are being raised, I'm advising persons to find a good attorney, a competent attorney, to get advice. I'm prepared to give some free legal advice to persons. I've already started to do that. And to say to persons, if you're a part of a commission that is deeply entrenched in our Constitution, it says how you will vacate office, and it gives you a timeline. And for those persons who may have been fortunate to be being promoted, that's it. But this country is too small for the divisiveness that I'm seeing.
And you know, unfortunately, it happens seemingly every 5 years. It's an ongoing cycle, and you know, the question is, where is it propagated? At the very top, midway, or where?
I must respectfully disagree. One of the things Dr. Minnis was criticized for was that he did not remove people. And he told us the country can't grow if you conduct yourself in this way.
Good point. Sir, thank you very much. We're out of time, but thank you very much for coming on, and best of luck to you in your future endeavors. When we return, we're going to be joined by a former Minister of Health. There's more on the record right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight, our topic, Dissecting Defeat. One of the greatest challenges of the Free National Movement during its term in office was COVID-19 and the handling of it. There were claims that basic rights and freedoms were taken away. Curfews and lockdowns seemed to anger the population and could have easily led to the FNM's defeat at the polls. And the relaxing of some of those restrictions were among the first actions taken by Prime Minister Philip Davis. Joining me for this segment is the former MP for Bambootown and former Minister of Health, Renward Wells. Welcome to On the Record, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Now let's talk about, really, if you could encapsulate from where you sit, some of the reasons that you see for the FNM's election defeat and even your defeat.
Jerome, I believe that the misery index for the Bahamian people was high. I believe that much of the good that we would have done, we did not, from the media standpoint, really put out to the Bahamian people. And I believe that when folks go to the polls, they ask the question more about how they feel about a particular administration. And so I believe that we suffered somewhat because of the perception and the misery index that a lot of folks were experiencing at this point in time as a result of Dorian, of COVID-19, and the global pandemic that we happen to still be in, though there is a very, very bright light at the end of this very dark tunnel that the globe and indeed the Bahamas has been going through.
Do you feel in hindsight that some of the measures were too restrictive and too long?
No, I believe that the measures were appropriate in the moment and in the time that they were executed. Hindsight is always 20/20, and folks are looking back. But let's remember, during our second wave, when I became minister in July, there was no vaccine. There was no way to be able to adequately ensure that we could continue to protect life and limb other than the emergency measures that was put in place and the restrictions, the COVID restrictions, be they the measures requiring wearing masks, social distancing, washing your hands and frequent surfaces that you touch, and ensuring with curfews and in some instances with lockdowns when an island was infected to be able to continue to keep the numbers of COVID down.
Now, Mr. Wells, there were instances where things were put into place and people questioned why. I know even from where I sat, it just seemed at times that we weren't given proper explanations as to why things were happening or left to deduce on our own. Do you think you could have done a better job with giving an explanation for some of the actions?
Jerome, we had press conferences every week where we answered all of the questions of the media the health professionals came forward and said, listen, here's the circumstance, here's why we're recommending this particular course of action to the government of the Bahamas based on what was happening in the global community. We must remember now, the Bahamas was not instituting measures that other countries around the globe that was experiencing COVID was not doing. Countries around the globe had lockdowns, countries around the globe had the mask mandate, countries around the globe had 6 feet separation for persons. Countries around the globe told us about how we sanitize. And so the science.
No, those things I got, and I think most people, for the most part, accepted some of the major things. But there were times that things with the emergency orders and different things were done, and it just didn't. And I'll tell you just what the public criticism was. It just didn't make sense, or we were left to do some things on our own, and that's why I ask in that context. I know you did the press conferences. I was even a part of some of them, but there were just instances when things were done and people just were left trying to understand what happened or why this was happening.
And Jerome, I'd say that, remember, up until December of last year, there was no vaccine. And the Bahamas received its first tranche of vaccines actually in March, most of the globe. And so we were operating in an environment where the science had to lead the way. And the science was saying to us, first of all, you needed to ensure the virus doesn't just, it jumps from person to person based on contact. And so you had to be able to ensure that you reduced the contact of individuals as much as possible when you had the potential for increasing circumstances of COVID within a community, within a particular pocket within an island. And so when you look at the emergency orders that were put out, they were always with that view in mind, that we were always seeking to keep down the spread of COVID within the community, trying to keep down community spread. And where community spread began to happen, then we ended up in circumstances where we called for lockdowns based on the science of the 14-day incubation period of the COVID-19 virus.
Now, one of the first measures undertaken by this new Prime Minister and administration was to extend the time on the curfew to 10:59, remove some of the stipulations on the travel visas, things that they said they were going to do, which are happening. Looking at that, looking at these things, are these the right measures, given the opportunity would the FNM have done this at this point?
Well, let's look at the reality, Jerome. We said to the Bahamian people back in July, both myself and the Prime Minister, that based on the level of vaccination, we had enough vaccines to be able to vaccinate a substantial portion of the Bahamian populace, and that once we begun that vaccination, we were experiencing the Delta variant and a surge. We said by mid-August that Grand Bahama would begin to turn the corner and we would begin to see the numbers coming down in Grand Bahama. Based on the science, that's exactly what took place. We said by the time we went to the general elections that we would have begun to flatten the curve and the numbers would have come down based on our vaccination, and that is exactly what happened. In a circumstance where you have decreasing numbers of infection and you have the decreasing numbers of hospitalization, you can lift a curfew because the intent of the curfew to keep folks separated, to keep them in a particular locale is no longer necessary. When you look at the travel visa, the government was talking about how they were going to get rid of the travel visa. They now realize the tool that the travel visa is, the requisite information that they're able to garner from this travel visa, and they are now saying that it is an excellent tool from the standpoint of just information. But let's look at the facts. The facts is, for Bahamians domestically, there was no cost for the travel visa. The Ministry of Health had asked that we kept the domestic travel visa because it was a way of keeping track, using it as more or less a contact tracing tool. And so all Bahamians needed to do was go on the website and simply upload the data of their test. There was no cost for that. And it gave us an opportunity, Jerome, if you left from New Providence going into a family island and you happened to become positive in that family island, we now know which flight you took. We knew all of the individuals who were on that flight. We know where you went. So we were able to then get a better handle from our surveillance unit in health around the spread of COVID. On the international side, the only thing that was reduced was for unvaccinated Bahamians, because vaccinated Bahamians, the travel visa was already free. They did not pay. For unvaccinated Bahamians, there was a $40 charge, and a part of that charge really was for the 5-day antigen test that you would have needed to have taken once you came back in country. For foreigners, though, it was a little different.
One of the criticisms of this administration when they were in opposition was there needed to be more testing and needed to be free testing, something that they say they will bring to the table. Why isn't it that your administration didn't move towards more testing and more free testing?
We did have free testing. We followed the WHO's rules. The WHO said that for countries, you test when someone presented with a symptom, whether they had evidence of maybe a flu or flu-like symptoms, you would then test that individual. The Bahamas government never charged for that testing.
But that was only at South Beach, correct?
No, it was throughout the country. We gave free COVID-19 RT-PCR tests to Bahamians. Free. We had a Gene Expert machine at South Beach. We had a Gene Expert machine at PMH. We had a Gene Expert machine in Grand Bahama. We had the Panther at PMH. We also had the BioFire that was donated to us by the United States. And then we had our National Reference Lab, Jerome, where we did an enormous amount of work updating, pulling the National Reference Lab into the 21st century with an RNA extractor, with the reagents necessary for COVID testing. So no Bahamian who presented to the medical establishment and said, listen, I believe it.
You had to present, though, with symptoms, yes, and not just sort of testing, like, for instance, how some private companies and other places are testing people on a regular basis. That was not available.
But what we also did, Jerome, was we also followed up with your contacts. If you tested positive, we followed up with your contacts and we ensured that they either quarantine or in certain circumstances they themselves received tests. And when we look at the overall landscape, Jerome, we have had hundreds of thousands of tests conducted in the Bahamas, rapid antigen tests, for those who were traveling and for those who we believe would have been potentially exposed to COVID.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about party politics now. Do you believe that your loss was a vote against Renward Wells, the FNM, or Dr. Hubert Minnis?
I'd say I believe that the Bahamian people, again, I believe that the misery index for them was somewhat high. And for those who felt that kind of result, either did not go to the polls or may have voted for another entity. Because when you look at the overall results from the 191,000 persons who were on the register, you know, the current government got right around what the polls said they would have got. It said they would have gotten about 35% of the vote. They ended up with 34% of the vote. And so at the end of the day, I believe that the base for the PLP came out and voted for them. The base of the Free National Movement in certain circumstances did not come out. And I believe, as others would have said, the potential for the having folks who were in quarantine vote and the exposure of COVID may have been a part of that. But also, too, again, I would say that the frustration and the misery index that some folks were experiencing, they couldn't bring themselves to vote for the other guy, but then they may not have been completely convinced internally to be able to come out and vote for us. And I tell you, in Bamboo Town, for instance, we have known for years that no member of the PLP can get about 1,900 votes. I got the most back in 2012 when I was a member of that party. I got 1,940. In 2017, the then PLP candidate, Greg Burrows, got 1,500 votes. The current member of parliament got 1,700 votes. She got 200 votes more this election than at the height of the Free National Movement's wave in 2017 than the previous PLP member got. But the base of the Free National Movement in Bamboo Town is 2,000 votes. And so we have to look at the circumstances surrounding why some of our members would not have come out. And obviously the party is in the process of doing that kind of analysis and seeking to get our people once again excited and united around the principles of once again.
Before we get to that, though, sir, will you be supporting Dr. Hubert Minnis in the November convention, if it happens in November, if he offers himself for leader? And will you be seeking to hold office or to seek re-election at some point?
I will say that I will be assessing the landscape as we move forward. I believe all of us who have toiled in the vineyard of the Free National Movement and working for and on behalf of the Bahamian people are viewing the landscape. I have been a very ardent supporter of the former Prime Minister and the leader of the party. I still support him. And so we're going to look at whatever decision it is that he chooses to make in November. And then a number of persons will then have to make decisions around the decision that he makes. And so, but I believe right now, Jerome, what we ought to be doing is we're looking at the circumstances of the election, what all has taken place, and the party is doing that kind of analysis. And based on that, then we'll be able to look as to how we move forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, sir. We are wrapping up, and I'm just going to steal 30 more seconds. Just interesting something you said. Yeah. If the leader decides to stay on, but what if the people send you a different message that maybe he is not the leader? You listen to the voice of the people, or you listen to the leader who wants to carry on?
I think that there's a compilation of both. It's not either on, it's both and, because there's the Council of the Free National Movement in convention that makes a decision as to who leads this party. And obviously, unlike any other political party inside the Bahamas, the voice of the Free National Movement really comes from its base, its grassroots, because you have 7 individuals from every association in the Free National Movement, all 39, who comes to convention to be able to vote. That's 273 persons of the 400 delegates who can vote for a leader of the Free National Movement. So you're going to get the voice of the community, of the party at a convention.
We're looking forward to that convention because I think that's going to be a very pivotal moment for the party. After an election defeat, there's always a lot of work to do with any opposition. So I know the party has a lot of work. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out in November if this convention happens. As very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being here, and certainly best of luck to you in your future endeavors.
Thank you. I will continue to work for and on behalf of the Bahamian people and for and on behalf of the fortunes of the Free National Movement.
It sounds like we'll see you back on another ticket. I'll see you there. All right, so thank you very much. When we come back, we're going to speak with the former Minister of National Security to hear his take. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. Tonight we continue our conversation on the topic Dissecting Defeat. The hierarchy of the Free National Movement has decided to keep now former Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis as leader of the opposition, at least until the FNM's convention forecast for November. This decision has caused a lot of speculation about the future of the FNM. My guest is the former MP for Mount Moriah, as well as the former Minister of National Security, Marvin Dame. Sir, welcome to On the Record. Let's dive right in. I'm going to ask this question in a couple parts. Right. Did you foresee the defeat on September 16? What do you see as some of the reasons for that defeat? And how do you think that your position as National Security Minister may have affected the outcome of the vote?
Wow, that's loaded.
we run out of time.
So let me start by saying this. This is politics, and no, I did not foreshadow this. I think we all expected that at the end of all of this, that we would have returned as the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But the people of the nation obviously thought differently. Those who showed up to vote and the vast majority who decided that they will remain at home. I think this is a harsh lesson for us as a party, and certainly for us in this nation, that you take nothing for granted. You know, whether my position as the former Minister of National Security had anything to do with it, no, I don't think so. I think we would have acquitted ourselves extremely well in the Ministry of National Security, and my hat goes out to certainly the staff at the ministry, the police force, the commissioner and his team, the Commodore and his team, and the Commissioner of Corrections and his team, and last but not least, the acting parliamentary commissioner and his team.
Sir, government and the authorities were heavily criticized during the pandemic for a lot of the initiatives under the emergency orders. People complained that they thought their rights were being infringed on, and police were given almost a free hand. Do you think that affected the outcome in some ways?
You know, that will certainly have to be seen. You know, I'm one of those who believe strongly in that we need to find out how we got here. How we got here. So what did we do wrong? And how can we make amends? How can we correct that which people may have perceived that we would have done wrong? You know, the thing is that this is what politics is all about, and I'm one of those who is a firm believer that we now need to go and dissect this. We need to do the proper research. We need to do the proper analysis, because all of us may have views as to how we got here, and many of them may be on point. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that I'm a firm believer that we need to scientifically dissect this so that we can learn from this and move forward.
Did you find, though, that as people were criticizing the police and some of the measures, do you find in any instances they were heavy-handed or excessive?
Well, you know, listen, this is a pandemic.
And I'm asking a former policeman.
No, but it's a good question. We're in a pandemic. I mean, we have, certainly none of us would have ever experienced anything like this in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I'm not only speaking to the Bahamas, but I'm speaking globally. And no one has gotten it right. We can all sit back and play our Monday morning quarterbacks, but still today, when you look throughout Europe, North America, South Central America, and Asia, and the rest of the world, there are a tremendous amount of lessons to be learned from this experience, and we're learning every day, and still there are parts that we still need to focus on and get right. You hear that from world leaders across the board, all right? Hopefully, as the scientists are saying, I mean, this certainly won't be the last. It's not the first, but it won't be the last.
Agreed.
And so what can we take away from this? Yeah, I mean, there are things that you go back, and we were doing it while I served as a minister, that when I met with the commissioner, the Commodore, on a weekly basis, right, and other key members within the ministry, we would look at, you know, what are some of the things that we think we ought to be doing better, and that's what it's all about.
We've got to jump forward a bit now. The prosecution of 3 former PLP cabinet ministers yielded no convictions, one still before the courts. You and another cabinet minister at the time were criticized for your roles in the Frank Smith matter. How damaging was that to you and even the party?
Well, I mean, damaging from the standpoint that, you know, I'm not, you know, these individuals were brought up on charges, not by Marvin Dames, all right? It's the system, the same system that is in place today, right? Damaging from the standpoint that some of the criticism that I was getting, that was certainly politically driven, and still is today, would have had some effect on my family. But I know exactly who I am, and others know me too, all right? I can go anywhere this world over, all right, and meet with almost anybody, especially in the intelligence world and law enforcement world, and that level of respect still exists today. I don't expect for that to change. I was brought up a certain way, and that's how I live my life, and I'll continue to do so.
Are you concerned, though, that some of your former colleagues may now face similar fates?
Well, I mean, why would I be concerned? If you live your life and you live it the way you should be living it, which is respect for others, right? Living a clean, straightforward life, why should you worry? You know, that's how I have lived my life.
Are you satisfied, though, that your former colleagues, all hands were clean?
Well, they'll have to speak for themselves. They'll have to speak for themselves.
One of the first acts of the new Minister of National Security was to reinstate some senior officers who were sent home under your administration. There are claims that this was politically motivated by the FNM. How do you respond to that and to their reinstatement?
Well, I mean, each is entitled to his opinion. You know, as a government, we would have made certain decisions, and we stand by those decisions that were made. I'm not going to go back now and say that because those decisions have been rescinded, that we would have made the wrong decisions, right? That's not what it's about. But we move on.
Do you think that during your campaign in 2017, the FNM would have overpromised the people? And is the PLP in danger of the same thing?
No, I don't think so. Listen, when we came into office, this Hubert Minnis-led administration, we met an economy that was in the dumpsters after going through at least four downgrades. We had negative growth, all right? But at least 2 years into our administration, we were able to rectify a lot of that. I mean, the growth, we brought growth back to the positive level, all right? We were able to mitigate any further downgrades. We were able to grow our foreign reserves significantly, okay? And even in the midst of Dorian, in the midst of this pandemic, our economy still remained vibrant. Our foreign reserves continue to grow. And so there were positive signs that we were certainly on the right track. Unfortunately, the unforeseen and the unimaginable occurred. We had Dorian, and we knew the impact of that on our economy, on our islands, on our people, and still the impact of that today. And we're still going through this pandemic. This global pandemic that continues to reap havoc around the world. But we remained steadfast as a government, and we ought to be proud of the successes that we would have reaped while as the government of this nation.
Speaking to the future now, your party has indicated that they're going into convention in November where positions will be contested, one being that of the leader. Is Hubert Minnis the man to continue to lead the FNM, in your opinion? And what is your role in the FNM going forward?
Well, I mean, let's start with the first. We will have, I mean, obviously those questions will be answered certainly very shortly. But I commend the former Prime Minister for his leadership while serving as the Prime Minister and the leader of the Free National Movement. Under his leadership, we would have achieved an awful lot, a lot that we should be proud of, certainly as a government, as a party, and as Bahamians. What the future holds, only time will tell. But as a party, I mean, there's no doubt about it. We lost at the polls. We lost resoundingly, something that we did not expect. And it now calls for tremendous introspection. We have to look at ourselves and have to ask ourselves some very fundamental questions. Do we want a repeat of this during the next 5 years? Or do we want to move this very proud and this great party? Do we want to move this into the future and a future of success?
Does that future include Marvin Dames?
I'm an F&M. That will not change. This country is in need of major transformation. I am not satisfied today. I am not pleased that we are there. I have a tremendous amount left in me, and I will be dedicating that to the F&M in whichever capacity that is. But I'm here for the long haul.
Marvin Dames, we're out of time for the segment. But it sounds like we're going to be seeing you a while. It sounds like you're going to be around a while.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm a Bahamian.
We have lots to talk about there.
I'm not going anywhere.
We'll be talking to you quite a bit.
Sir.
I want to thank you and thank you for your service. And I want to personally thank you as well because, during your time as a Minister of National Security, you afforded me and this network an opportunity into some organizations, the police force, defense force, to do some groundbreaking work. And I just wanted to personally thank you for that.
My pleasure,
I asked you, you approved it, and we were able to do some great things. And so I thank you for that. And all the best to you in the future.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So when we come back, a little different perspective on frontline politics from behind the scenes. A very special guest. Most of you don't know. Stay with us. We're back right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. And we're back on the record. This is our final segment tonight. Our topic is Dissecting Defeat. Anyone who has ever been involved in politics will tell you it's the background support that determines how successful you are. It is these men and women who are unseen and often unknown. In many cases, though, they are the spouses who keep the machinery going. This week, we decided to feature someone who knows that role all too well. Stacy Dames is the wife of now former National Security Minister Marvin Dames. Welcome to On the Record. I wanted to bring you on to have this quick discussion so that people know what it's like behind the scenes. So really tell us, what is it like being the wife, or in some instances now the spouse even, of a member of parliament and minister?
Well, thanks for having me, Jerome. Let's go back a little bit. I told Marvin initially when he went into politics that it was something I wasn't too sure about. I'm a very private person. I like to keep our, lifestyle very simple but very quiet. And of course, going into politics meant everything was opened up and everything was just public. It was constant. So you no longer had a personal or a private life. But for me, I decided that it was something that he was passionate about, and I then adopted the same passion. And so I was with him for the long haul, it meant going through it day to day. The early mornings, the late nights, the frequent trips. So it wasn't necessarily an easy task, but definitely one that I was on the journey with him.
Now, In a lot of instances, when when the MP becomes the minister, he's tied really to the ministry.
Right.
But the work in the constituency goes on. I think that's where a lot of your work would have come in. Eh?
Correct. So I worked the constituency office from day one up until the 16th. And, you know, I saw it initially as a very daunting task, but soon fell in love with it because I fell in love with the community. I bonded very well with a lot of the constituents in Mount Moriah, the old, the young, the in-between. So on a day-to-day basis, my day would start at 9, but clear into 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would still be receiving messages of distress or, you know, needing to see me or come into the office. But the office itself, I think, became, again, a part of me because I know that my husband was not able to be there on a day-to-day basis because of his other engagement as the cabinet minister or as the Minister of National Security. So it meant, again, as an extension of having his back, being in the office, being in the community, to hear those requests on a daily basis.
Going into the election, you know, many of the observers had Marvin, Dames, and Mount Moriah in the win column for the FNM. What was it like that night of the 16th when you realized that that he had lost the constituency?
Yeah, you know, it was extremely disappointing in the terms of we worked very hard from before elections, before 2017. Sorry, we were on the ground, and we never left the ground. We were there day in and day out. You know, so it was a constant thing for us. It wasn't like we went missing and we just popped back up when the election was called in August. So for us, we worked very hard in Mount Moriah, and we felt really good going into it. We felt that we had a good support base. So obviously, it was a big disappointment.
Final question. You know, people see the public life, they see the appearances, they see, you know, the ministerial car, the driver, the outrider, they see all of that stuff. But what is it like when now the criticisms hit, when he is under attack in the public and the pressures of governance begin to bear down? What was that like?
I think, you know, we always say it well. As a Dames family, we've stuck together. My daughter has been a very integral part as well of the campaign, has always been. We stick together. And the thing is I know who he is. I know who my husband is. I've been with him 25 years in marriage. I know that he is true to what he presents in the forefront. So hearing it, there was a short while that I actually came off of social media because it bothered me. But if you know who the person is, if you know Marvin Dames, you know that he's a person of integrity and that he stands for truth. And so it kind of water rolls off my back now, you know.
Stacy Dames, thank you so much for coming on for this short segment. I know I had to twist your arm to come on, but I thank you. I thought it was important to give that perspective. So thank you very much. Now, yeah, you get to enjoy some time off, eh?
Yes, definitely. Much needed time.
All right, thank you very much again for coming. All the best to you. That's going to do it, though, for this week's episode of On the Record. Special thanks to all of my guests, to my technical and production staff. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place, right here on The Record.